Reincarnation. Today's subject is not a thing that's an ordinary thing in Western IDs, but in Eastern IDs is quite a thing. Today we'll talk about that with Sandrius from India on the Global Atheist. Welcome viewers, welcome Sandrius. Glad to meet you, first for me. And let's have a talk about reincarnation. My first question is, what's the view in, let's say, Asia about reincarnation? What do they mean when they talk about that?
Sure. Reincarnation is a bit simple in the basics. Like it's about having different lives in different times. Like you are born as something, not necessarily human. You might be born as something else as well. Then you complete that life, you die, and then you get reborn or reincarnated as something else. And the details vary when it comes to the religion in topic. I think the most authority body, religion-wise body in terms of reincarnation is Hinduism, because as far as I have seen, they have the oldest concept of reincarnation, and the other Eastern philosophies that talk about reincarnation generally derives from that. For example, Buddhism derives its concept of reincarnation from Hinduism. It's a bit different, but the origin point is Hinduism in most aspects. And when you go into the details of reincarnation in terms of Hinduism, then what it comes is that everyone has multiple lives. Like you don't have a single life, which is also something Buddhism talks about. And the concept is you are born as a much lower form of life form. You might not even be a human. You complete that life, and based on the good deeds and the bad deeds you did, the concept of karma and the concept of karma and punya pap, where punya is doing something good and pap is doing something bad, good evil thing, that balance. And karma basically means the good part. Although karma, see, the concept of karma means task if you directly translate the word. A task like karma is work and karma is doing that work. So and it usually has the positive aspect. When someone talks about doing karma, they usually talk about doing something good, the punya side. But karma is neutral in that terms, like it can be negative as well. And based on the karma and the punya balance you have collected in your that life, you get reborn as something based on that. If you did good, if the balance is towards the good side, then you get reborn as some higher being relative to that life you were born in. And if you
may I ask a question about that?
Yeah, sure.
How exactly is, let's say, the good bit or bad bit in karma evaluated?
There's no strict rules to that. And when it comes to the Eastern philosophies, it's mostly a group of religions which you call as the dharmic religions. So there's the concept of dharma and adharma, where dharma is the right way and adharma is the wrong way. And the concept falls into the religious interpretation of what is the dharmic way and what is the adharmic way. And it's not exactly black and white. It's a bit subjective, and goes into the details of translation and how the perspective of the person translating it. But that's the basic concept, and it's very conflicting depending on the various religions and the text you are referring to. But that's the basic scale of dharmic acts and adharmic acts, where dharmic acts give you punya, the good deed, and doing something bad, the adharmic path will give you pap, which leads to negative karma, and the balance slides that way. There's no definitive rule because we what we can do is way too varied for someone to tell
I
that this
mean,
specific task is good and this specific task is bad.
yeah,
There are
yes.
some major ones, but nothing definitive.
I mean, I was wondering. I mean, this sounds a bit human-centric. I wonder, for instance, how if I were to live as, let's say, a beetle, how can I even do good or bad in that sense?
If
Considering,
you, I didn't
I
get
mean,
the question.
let's say beetle. The
Ah,
beetle.
beetle. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
it's
really not.
as far as we know, beetles are no, um, what do you say, moral agents.
Yes, so there is no definitive, there is almost nothing when it comes to the good and bad of what an animal can do, especially something as detached from human forms as insects. So it's very difficult to define in that levels. There might be some form of definition when it comes to the mammals who are a bit closer to our kind, dogs or stuff like that. But that part is not really definitive. What's
Okay.
definite, relatively definitive is the things you can do as a human.
Ah,
Like, for example, specifically in Hinduism, especially there are different tiers of we have talked about the caste system earlier in a different episode. So that's where the definitions and the more defined ways of dharma, dharma, punya, pap is laid down. But there's not any properly laid out path when it comes to the non-human life forms. It's just mentioned that there are lower forms, higher forms, and human is the highest form, and then within human there are different castes as different levels of purity
oh
and
yes, of course.
that kind of stuff.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And this
I,
reminds me, it's completely unrelated. It's the intro has changed. It's kind of nice. The last intro I saw was different from that. It's a nice
yeah.
upgrade, I will say. So just a different upgrade.
Weirdly enough, I talk to people who think that reincarnation is a thing here in the Netherlands where I live, and at least from the outside, it looks like they had pretty much the same ideas than what you just explained, but they wouldn't want to talk about the, let's say, lower life forms. Presumably, either because they didn't understand exactly that, or in at least one case, a person who very wisely didn't agree with the idea of lower life forms and higher life forms, which may be a very Western idea, but that to me does make sense. I mean, how exactly do we judge high and low in life forms?
Uh, there is not much of an accuracy is not the right term here, but there is not any definitive scale as per se. But every religion has some life forms beyond human, if we just consider sacred. For example, cow is a big thing in Hinduism. So animals like that will be considered higher than other animals. But then again, there are way too many animals to properly scale them. So it comes down to basic idea like maybe a mammal is higher than a fish, or a fish is higher than an insect. Some basic stuff like that, other than some specific animals like cows and so.
If we have a look at Western thought, that used to be the general idea. With, I mean, there used to be the scale of being, with roughly unicellular life at the bottom and more complex life above that, with, of course, culminating in humans. Weirdly, it's always the humans are on top.
Yes, of course. Yeah, the concept of the lower life form starting from unicellular is not part of the reincarnation concept because the discovery of cell and the concept and the discovery that animals can be unicellular is much a newer concept to the age of the theory of reincarnation and all. When the concept of reincarnation and the other religions were formed, those discoveries weren't made, so those haven't been into consideration while expanding this
Okay, yes.
ideology.
I mean, in Western
Probably
thought,
insects are the lowest form that comes into mind when in the context of reincarnation because others weren't discovered or well known at least yet.
yeah, that makes sense. Um, so I was trying to say something, but it escaped my mind. Oh, yes, of course, in the West, ideas about reincarnation were imported from the East a few centuries ago, when, of course, ideas on life had evolved quite a bit. At least we were aware of unicellular life. We were aware that there was a natural order to beings that doesn't necessarily mean one is better than the other, but different. And how they are different, I mean, as in biological species, stuff like that. And I
Uh,
now realize that, of course, in the East, the idea of reincarnation have been around for much longer. And can you expand on that a bit? How long have
I
these ideas been around?
Yeah, sure. I think it has a bit to do with the colonial phase because the concept of reincarnation. I feel I'm not exactly sure this is the completely right and accurate answer, but this is what my theory is.
Mhm.
Uh,
Go
the
ahead.
concept of reincarnation entered into the Western philosophy much later. Maybe I think it came through the Eastern philosophy, and it came through the Eastern philosophy during the colonial phase when they travel across different countries and came back and brought back different materials along with some concept of philosophy. So
Yeah.
by the time the concept of reincarnation entered Western philosophy, much more discoveries were already made. The discoveries were also much more discoveries were also made in the eastern side, but the reincarnation was from an era when those discoveries weren't made. While reincarnation came into a popular theory into West when these discoveries were already made. Hence, the tire system is much more broader in the Western concepts, and I think that's why this difference comes in. And just like some of the I can't pinpoint at exact philosophies, but the East has also brought in several philosophies from the West. And when we got those philosophies into our system, we had already made much more discoveries compared to the West when those philosophies were evolved, like not when we got those from the West. So that those kind of parity comes in, and that's where those advances come in, and that's a bit of the problem with the religious system where it doesn't matter how old it is, it's always considered to be definitive, like it has and has to be that way. There is no form of evolution, unlike science where you are always trying to improve upon some theory you have. Hence we have theories that get proven wrong and new better theories come in. While you do that with religion, you start riots.
Yeah, I mean, there are interesting bits of that. I mean, first of all, let's say traffic of ideas between, let's say, Europe and India has been along for a long time, much longer than colonialism. Through the trade routes through the Middle East and the Silk Road and stuff like that. I mean, I'm told that even the late Roman Empire had trade connection with India. So ideas must have traveled.
Yes, that's true, especially within the countries that were connected by land, like the entire Asia plus Europe region at least were connected by land. So those trade relations were much older, as you mentioned, the Roman Empire. I think Alexander also came to India, and then there are the Persians. There have been connections much older than their colonial phase, But the difference is travel was much slower back then. So
Yes.
by the time my philosophy entered from, let's say, India to, let's say, Britain, it had already been gone through multiple evolutions. Let's not exactly evolution, translations, multiple translations within the West. It didn't directly travel there. While from the colonial era and beyond, what happened is that travel become much faster, and when, especially when the ship routes, the ocean routes opened up, what happened is you travel directly from America or Britain to India and the Eastern countries, instead of going from one country to another country to finally reach Europe and stuff. Hence, the translations, much of the translations wasn't there. It was more of a direct transfer from one place to another. For example, it's similar to the concept you might. I'm sure you have heard about the, the game of telephones, that experiment
Mhm.
where something is translated from one end of the line to the end, and we see how it evolves from and keeps getting further from the truth by the time it reaches the other
Yeah.
end. So something similar like that happened between those different eras, where one was more direct and another was, all the roots existed, there was several translation between that concept coming from one place to the other.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
uh,
aware.
y- uh Sorry.
I'm aware that in, let's say, the game of chess and concepts in mathematics, the ideas from India were imported into Europe through Arabia and
Yes,
Arab
yes,
and Islamic culture.
yes. A great
And
example,
maybe
as you
within,
mentioned.
yeah, I mean, the thing is, of course, particularly in mathematics, but also in a game like chess, it can translate reasonably fair by just people teaching another one.
Yes, yes. And the better example would be the numbers, where in the Western culture it's known as the decibels. The decibel system has another name.
Yeah, we call
Something.
them Arabic numbers.
Yeah, yeah. You
I mean, they're
exactly.
essentially, I mean, the idea is Indian,
Yes, yes, yes.
and through Arabic interchange, eventually it got into Italy around the 12th century. It's not
I
important,
see.
but we didn't use Arabic numerals or Arabic Indian numerals until roughly 1400. And then they defeated Latin numbers, which were terrible.
I
Absolutely.
think that change started somewhere in the later Roman Empire. That shift started from Roman numerals to the
Yeah.
decimal system.
Yeah.
And yes, that's the point. Like, and a fun fact on that, now we are now, due to globalization and internet and all, a lot of hidden, not exactly hidden truths, some missing parts have been coming out in the open, like the fact that the numbers are called Arabic numbers in the Western phase instead of calling them Indian numbers, although that's where the
Mhm.
origination come from. So the fun fact is, India and some other parts of the Eastern Asian countries is facing a new rise in the religious nationalist regimes, and so they try to, just like any other nationalist regime, there's a concept of hating the minorities and blaming them for everything wrong that comes. So
Yes.
that's a fun. So they a running concept is that Arab stole things from India and sold them as their own, which is not true. The numbers are called Arabic because that's where the Westerners learned from. They didn't learn
Yes.
directly from India, not because Arabs told them. Arabs started using them, then they realized it's a better system and they started using them. Hence, they gave the name to where they thought the source was. It
Yeah.
wasn't a thing about stealing and rebranding or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just a fun fact.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
about the chess, there's a little there's another tie to the chess story. Chess doesn't come directly from India. Chess came to India from Sri Lanka. So there's another missing
Oh,
tie.
oh, that's new. That's new to me. I mean, I'm an avid chess player, but that's the modern version of chess. and I know quite a bit of the history of chess, and now the name of it escapes me for a bit, but the bit that the Arabs imported from India was a game similar to chess, but on a larger board with many more pieces. Shatanga is the name that pops up, but I may be wrong.
That's something I haven't heard about. There's something called checkers. I don't like. Just clarify. I'm pretty sure you're not talking about that, but
No.
that's something I haven't heard about. I guess I'll look into that. But I
I
didn't
mean,
know.
I'm talking about chess, on the 8x8 board with kings, queens, rooks, bishops, and knights and pawns. Maybe,
Ha ha
maybe,
ha.
maybe you don't. I mean, it's played worldwide, but
Ah, yeah. That's
Mr. Anand was an Indian world champion a few decades
yes,
ago.
yes, yes. Ha ha. Yes, he was. Yes,
Well,
he's really
there's no
talented.
higher accolade than world champion.
Yes, yes.
My nation produced one world champion in the 1930s.
Okay.
I'm very proud of that, but today his shine has waned a bit. He's been
I
dead for
see.
30 years
I
now.
am into chess as well, but not at a level that I have all the information that you have. I play very rarely. I
No,
like
no
it, but I
worries.
don't play it much.
No worries. It's just something that I'm passionate about. That eventually, when we dig deep enough, we got from India and, as you claim, Sri Lanka. Can you expand
Yeah,
on
yeah.
this?
Yes. Have you, I think you have heard about the epic of Ramayana, right?
Yes, I have. Never read
So,
anything about it, but I've seen films about it. Does
I
that
see.
work?
That's good enough. I just wanted to know if you have heard about it or not.
Okay.
If you have heard about Ramayana, then I think you have also heard about the main villain of the story, Ravan.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the story goes that chess was originally invented by the wife of Ravan. I'm forgetting the name. She mainly started. That's the story. That's the mythology. But it matters to the context a bit. The story is that the wife of Ravan invented chess to teach Ravan the wisdom and the technical ways of the war because he was all about brute force because he was strong with several boons and mystical powers and stuff. So that's all his focus was, and her idea was bringing him into the strategy side of wars through this game. And Ravan ruled Lanka, which is Sri Lanka now. So that's the evidence that it actually came from Lanka. But this is the mythological version of the story. I'll have to dig a little deeper with the historical evidence
Okay.
and stuff. But that just proves that it originated from somewhere else before coming to India.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
We may get back to that another time, but other than after a game of chess is done, you set up the board again for another game. Life from, let's say, modern view isn't like that. So, how did we get to the idea of reincarnation? Do you have any idea of that?
That's no, not just I don't. I don't think anyone has a any any kind of uh, not just theory, any kind of research that can point at some single or a group of origins because it dates back to a era so old that historical records doesn't have any records of back then. It just got there was a time when writing wasn't a thing. It was stuff were just passed down vocally, so it dates as back as that. Hence, no, I don't think anyone can point to a single origin of the reincarnation other than the region at most.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's my view is that uh, this is conjecture, not something we have real evidence about. And with a friend of mine expressed it like people who believe in reincarnation just want to have another go at life.
Yes.
That's not necessarily the way you look at it, but I found that a very fetching way to express it.
Actually, that is a concept that's connected to reincarnation, even in the Eastern views, if you'll say it. And I like the when it comes to various versions of the theory. I think Buddhism has the more not realistic because it's still imaginary in a way. It's not something that based on evidence, but they have a better explanation to it. The concept is that the general concept in Buddhism is living is kind of suffering. You stay alive by suffering different sufferings, and the goal is to attain ultimate peace. And they call the term they use for that is moksha. Like you attain moksha, and moksha is basically eternal peace. And if you get reincarnated as a different life, then you again get back to the cycle of suffering from life to death and everything that comes between. And you must do as much of good deed as possible, that you after your that current life ends, you attain moksha instead of getting sent again a second time or third time or what nth time to have a better chance at attaining moksha. So that's the version of Buddhism, and I prefer that one. And other than that, of course, there's a concept of hell and heaven that's a bit extreme versions of it, where I think moksha comes closer to the concept of heaven, and hell is the punishment side as well. Although reincarnation isn't as ingrained with religion in the Abrahamic ones, including Christianity, Islam, and all, as it is with the dharmic ones like Hinduism and Buddhism. I think it's also part of Jainism. I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure it will be part of Jainism as well.
That may well be the case. Unfortunately, I know very little about Jainism, so I have no wisdom there. I mean, in let's say in European Christianity, there's no such thing as reincarnation. The beliefs in Christianity are you live, you die, you go to heaven or you go to hell, and that's the end of it. Or no, sorry, that's wrong. Not the end of it. That's the end. That's there for the rest of the time, for always, for eternity.
Yeah.
So that's essentially life is a one-time event.
Yes, yes. And
Uh,
there are also some parts of reincarnation which is not directly connected to religion. For example, the concept of having a previous life, having a full-fledged previous life where you will have people who psychics and stuff like that who talk to people and dig out what they did in their previous life and stuff like that. Those more like those feel just like shows and consolations, to be exact, because they're not even part of the religious concept where reincarnation actually comes from. There's that, and then there's the origin and religious interpretations.
yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point you're broaching. Evidence for reincarnation. I know that in the West, there were people who, particularly psychologists or people who were meddling in that stuff, who have recorded stories of children who were talking about a previous life that lines to real people. I don't believe a word of that, but it's narrative tradition, with including real, educated, university trained psychologists.
Yes,
I
I
won't go
have heard
into
about that.
yeah, I won't go into detail, but essentially children talking about previous lives that can somehow be aligned with real people's histories, what we know about them.
Yes, I have heard
I
about that. It's all stuff like that. You can also hear about stuff like that in India as well. It's not just in the West. The difference is when we talk about reincarnation here, it's usually by default means the religious side, while if you talk about reincarnation in the West, it usually means those kind of stories. Although both exist both places, like stories
I
like
mean,
that and shows like that is part of Indian culture as well. And same as you, I also don't believe at all
yeah.
about them. It's just
I mean,
fun to know about and make good stories.
my first reason to doubt those stories is that many people remember past lives as kings, queens, government ministers, and heroes, rather than, let's say, the toilet cleaner.
Yeah, of course.
That makes it quite suspect.
Of course.
And I mean, I understand we can only do this kind of comparison with people of whom we know some history. We don't know about the toilet cleaner, we only know that they must have been there, but we know nothing about their lives. So, of course, that's blooded up. And I think that the methodology of children's stories is also not so good. I mean,
Yeah.
children pick up things. That's what children do. It's a job. So they pick up things from the parents at the dinner table, from TV, things they hear. So I'm not convinced that it works like that. And there's also the bit why only some children or other people who, when adults say, yay, I was, let's say, Alexander the Great in a past life. It's a bit weird. Is this a topic of discussion in India?
Yeah, it's part of discussion here as well. But as I said, that it exists completely here as well. It's also pretty common here as well. But the difference is the more common side is the religious discussions and the concept of dharma and stuff. So hearing the term reincarnation generally makes people think about that side of the discussion, not these stories. Also, that is also very common here as well. There are shows that make money out of stories like that and stuff like that. It's really common here as well, just not as common as the philosophical side of it.
Yeah, okay. Mm, does
We even have a name for the people like that. I just let me check. I forgot the name.
click.
I'll get back to that.
Speak memory.
Uh, Jyotish, yeah, sorry. The term is
Please explain.
Jyotish.
Okay, I forgot exactly what that was about.
Yeah, I remember. Let me just summarize it. Basically, the concept of remembering past lives and
Oh, yes,
having a
yes, yes.
vivid memory of the past life, it's pretty common here, and it's so common that we have a term for people who can remember their past lives. The Bengali term is Jyotishar, and the Hindi version is same, just pronunciation is a big difference. Jyotishar. The
Okay,
word is Jyotishar.
yeah, okay, interesting. Um,
So,
Something drops.
yeah, my water bottle fell.
I see. Uh, the, let's say, remarkable examples of that you know?
There are some, but I don't exactly remember them.
Okay, yeah.
I think
Weirdly enough,
there's a particular film that has been very popular, but I think it was based on true events.
hey, there's Dean. Hello.
Hey, how are you guys doing? How's my audio?
Yeah,
You
it's
sound
cool.
fine.
Thank
Welcome to the show.
you. Thank you.
We were having a conversation about reincarnation. Um, do you have any first off your hand comments about that?
I was wondering, I don't know if you guys have covered this already, but what really strikes me always is, people will always, when you get these stories of people who remember past lives and they remember.
We were just discussing that.
Yeah. So I want to know, why do people always remember these lives that they spent as a rich merchant or as a king or a queen, but they will never remember the life that they spend as a housefly eating poop?
Oh, my example was a toilet cleaner, but yes.
Why don't they remember the life that they spent as as a housefly, or the life that they spent as a flea drinking blood on on the ass of a baboon or something? Why is it always these extravagant stories? Is there something in the system that that lends itself to that I'm not understanding?
Oh, good question.
Is it because of a
Curious.
karma or something? How does that work?
How it works is by the concept of karma, where the amount of good deed you have done in one life determines how you will be reincarnated at the next life. But
Right.
coming to the point of why people always remember their past life as something grand, it's similar to the concept of it's a very similar to, you will see that when authority bodies talk about messages from God, it always aligns with what they already believe in. It's similar to that having some kind of mythical, what should I say, some kind of mythical divine acceptance of what you already believe in, or divine confirmation bias, something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, it's dumb. And Rainy was also talking about when it comes to shows that talk about past life and psychics having some subject talking about their past life. It's usually children, which makes sense because children are very easily personate. They are easy to personate, and there's something I don't remember who's saying it was. It's some psychologist, like proper psychologist, saying that children are very good learners, but they're very bad interpreters. So they're always learning from everything because everything is new for them, and it's kind of important for survival. It's the natural system of making children learn from others just to survive. But what happens is, although they're collecting everything, they don't have the experience to actually judge what the reason behind the source is. So they end up making very bad, false, and stupid assumptions, although it's coming at the expense of them actually learning something.
Yeah.
And that leads to them believing in stories very easily, and cooking up stories of their own maybe they themselves don't. It comes from somewhere, and then it goes out of control, and then of course it comes to people who are good at making an impression on people and having a psychological control, which is easy to do with children.
Yeah. Do we have any cases of people remembering these past lives in a culture that does not have reincarnation?
Oh,
So say for example, do we have anybody remembering past lives or past lives being triggered in a culture that's not Hindu or culture that's not Buddhist? For example, there's a Mormon that wakes up and remembers past lives. Or there's a Muslim that wakes up and remembers past lives. Do we have any of that happening anywhere?
I think we have stories like that. The problem is, I'm very sure there are multiple stories like that. I just
Yeah.
can't give an example myself because I'm not good at remembering stuff, and this is not something I actually search because stories like when it comes to stories like that, I'm already aware that it's BS. So I don't look
Yeah.
into that to a level that I'll remember it. But I'm very sure you'll find stories like that. You'll find multiple of them. I'm very confident that a single search will
Yeah.
give you at least 10 stories.
Because I'm of the impression that I think that people are primed, by the culture that they are born into, and there's certain things that happen, and then all of a sudden something psychological is triggered, and some memory is misinterpreted, or some daydream is misinterpreted, or somebody in the community with respect and authority tells them, oh no, you that thing you're talking about now, that's from your past life, and then they just run with it.
Yeah. That
I mean,
definitely happens. We do get a lot of our beliefs and the way we look into life comes from social conditioning. That's just unavoidable. And
that's
how much it affects you and how much it shapes you definitely varies from person to person.
Yeah.
But getting it is unavoidable. You definitely get it, no matter how small the society you are part of.
I mean, it's pretty much the same like people interpreting psychological problems like demonic possession. That's very much a thing within Christianity, also a bit in Islam. I haven't got a clue if that's a thing in Hinduism. But
Yeah, it's common here as well. Um, it's a The English term is definitely is still possession everywhere. It has a the Bengali term is bhor kora, like spirits and ghost concept in the English language. It's called Pretatma in Bengali, and the sentence would be like, "Okay, Pretatma bhor koreche," which translates into the person has been possessed by spirits and devils.
yeah,
It's the concept is pretty common here as well, and you will even hear stories like people actually, real people getting possessed in real life and acting strange. If you go into the some rural secluded parts and stuff, I've myself heard second-hand stories. Not directly, I haven't witnessed it personally, but I've had heard several second and third-hand stories about it. And of course, I don't believe it, but you will hear stories like that pretty commonly here as well. It's pretty common. There's one tiny difference though when it comes to uh, both Christianity and Islam, and the topics of possession comes. It's almost. I don't think it's not just almost. Yeah, it's almost always being possessed for some kind of evil spirit or demon or something sent by Satan, as the saying goes. But when it comes to Hinduism, possession might not always be from a evil spirit. Sometimes you will also hear stories about being possessed by gods and deities or lower gods, not directly the higher ones. But
Yeah.
there are different types of gods, so people might also get possessed by the good ones, as the saying
Right.
goes. It's not necessarily being possessed by the evil ones, but the concept of being possessed and stories like that come across here as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry.
yeah, Dean, go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to ask, you know, this process of reincarnation and the cyclical nature of it, at the end of it, the ultimate goal is to ascend this cycle of reincarnation and rebirth, right? And then to become more or less like more godly, right? Now tell me, the god characters, the many of them, you know, like, are they also the end result of a process of cyclical reincarnation, or are they above and beyond that level of reincarnation?
There are two aspects to the story. The gods per se, they are not part of the reincarnation process.
So the godheads don't get reincarnated.
No, they already existed. They existed before, you know, just like just like the Abrahamic religions. The concept is similar here, that they existed for eternity before everything was there, and they created parts of it or the entire thing, and then other stuff came out, and then comes the different avatars of gods, like
Right.
they came down to earth being someone in the form of something or someone, some person. So when the avatar concept comes in, they go through the reincarnation process. But since they are already gods coming down as something, they by default don't get reincarnated into a different life form. They just directly go to heaven and stuff like that, and then maybe come down as a different avatar in some different century and stuff like that.
Okay.
And actually, there's three aspects. This was the two. The third is the sages, you know, the messengers or the priests or whatever you call them, those group of people getting enlightened and then escaping the reincarnation cycle. So that's the third side. A good example of this would be Buddha himself. Like Buddha is not a god. Like, yeah, Buddhist now almost has risen him to the level of God, but by his own teachings, he never claimed himself to be a god or messenger of God or anything like that. He was a human who noticed the disparities and the, you know, the pain in human suffering in the human society, and so he went out and got enlightened, and that's how.
Yeah, what I was going to ask. So let me just run this by you to see if I've got it correctly, right? So
Sure.
the Brahma is the eternal Godhead, right? And then the
Yes.
incarnations, for example, that would be Rama, Sita, Lakshmi. All of those gods are reincarnations of the Godhead. And then the sages, for example, these are the humans. Are they also involved in there somewhere, or are they?
Yes, they are involved. You almost got it correct. You got one of the names wrong. Lakshmi herself is a deity. Like, she's not an avatar. She is a deity herself. The other names were correct.
I didn't.
It's okay.
You know, and if you look at sects of Hinduism, for example, the Hare Krishnas, they've got this reverence for Prabhupada, and you know, there are probably other sects that I'm unfamiliar with. Are those people that they have these reverence for? Are they considered the sages or the?
The question is, I'm sorry.
I'm saying, are people like that considered the sages? You know, the sage.
Okay. Yeah. It actually depends a bit on the sect you're talking about. As you mentioned, Hare Krishnas. The Hare Krishnas are the group. Actually, the technical term of the group will be called ISKCON. Like they originate, they are ISKCONs, and the international the entire society and the group and the ideology is ISKCON, and I'm not sure how the term. Actually, it's pretty easy to guess how the term Hare Krishna came from. Like that's what they keep chanting, but the actual name is ISKCON. They are the same people. They are known as Hare Krishnas in the Western world because of because of the chanting they keep of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. For them, they are part of the. They are
clogging up the airports. That's
yeah, that's funny.
That's a bit of what we call that story here. I haven't seen Hare Krishna people decades.
Acha. They are, if I draw a comparison, then they would be the missionaries of Hinduism. They worked a very similar way. They spread across everywhere. They are also the volunteers and the people actually on the ground are driven by goodwill and the concept of reaching heaven, doing good deed, while the upper ones are actually motivated by money. And just like the Catholic Church and the missionaries they control, ISKCON also has a huge wealth and get donated by very rich people and stuff like that. It's very similar. Hinduism may be a bit different from Christianity, but when it comes to ISKCON, they are the Hindu version of the missionary system, almost. Just the difference is I haven't heard of any story of them going down to the path of torturing people, which the Catholic Church has done. At least they haven't done that. That's the good difference. But the business model is the same. But the business model is exactly similar. And when it comes to the Hare Krishnas, they call themselves Hindus as well. They are part of Hinduism. But the primary god they celebrate, whom they give more importance than the other major gods, is Krishna. For them, the top god is Krishna, and Krishna is a avatar of Vishnu. So Krishna and Vishnu are the main object of worshipping for them. And the primary book they celebrate is Gita, which is Gita is basically a book where Krishna tells the mythical character Arjun. Arjun is part of the epic Mahabharata. So this Gita part is within Mahabharata, but a separate book where it only captures the teachings of Krishna, the teaching that Krishna passed on to Arjun during the course of Mahabharata. That's the primary book for them, while Hinduism itself has several books. You cannot point at one single book. That's a bit of conflict, and which is something why different sects exist, where different sects focuses on different gods and different books per se. And the other sect would be, then there are some sects who celebrate Shiva as the primary god, who is also one of the top ones, who is the god of destruction and stuff like that. And just like Greek mythology, where there's god of destruction, god of this, god of that, Hinduism also has that, where Shiva is god of destruction, Vishnu is the god who protects earth from the whole of earth from different cosmic problems and stuff like that, while Brahma is the god who created everything and super body who supervises everything, who doesn't do stuff himself per se, and stuff like that.
I mean, if you think Christianity is complex, hold your beer when you're a Hindu. I try to read a bit of Hindu scripture, but God is so much. I mean, I never read the Bible completely. I mean, I read parts of the Bible, but there's quite a lot of incredibly boring bits, and I skipped them.
Yeah, that's actually something I find, it's not actually problematic per se, but that's something that makes Hinduism so confusing, because while you read Bible, you pretty much know what Christianity is. There's no such one book you can point to when it comes to Hinduism.
Yeah. Are there any gurus alive that know all the names of all the gods? That's what I want to know.
I don't think there is any one person, because what happens is, the saying that there are some 13 crore gods in Hinduism, a little bit of nuance to that is that the 13 crore gods are not individual gods. The majority of them is different versions of the same god. So there's that. That's a part that people ignore when they talk about 13 crore gods in Hinduism. So that's a nuance to that. The major, the primary gods and the demigods and stuff, they are much more limited to that 13 crore number.
So as I understand it, there, the term Hindu as well is very broad, because within Hinduism there are certain, like you'll find certain Hindus are more inclined to a certain deity, You know, they will, for example, focus. There will be some that are exclusive to Rama, for example. That's the deity of choice, and they go for that, and etc. Going down the line, you know. So, and I think that's a very foreign concept to Western culture. You know, who are very like focused on they've got one focus. You know,
Actually, it's not that different.
Problems with the attention span. You know, like if they don't have one thing to focus at, they lose.
May I comment? I mean, as I understand it, Christians have very varied idea about what exactly they believe.
Yeah.
I don't think they even agree on what exactly Christ is supposed to be and what he did and what we're supposed to learn from that. At least Catholics and Protestants firmly disagree, and in Protestantism it gets even worse. Something like 40,000 churches and sects.
Yeah.
And I mean, Hinduism has been around for quite a bit longer, so they had quite a bit more opportunity to disagree.
Actually, I have to agree with Hein here. The thing is, it's not that different if you look into it. The comparison would be when it comes to Christianity itself is very subdivided. Like there are Catholics, there are Roman Catholics, there are Protestants, there are Mormons, and stuff like that. It's similar here. The tiny difference is the gods are the same. Like Catholics, Protestants, all worship the same God. The difference comes down in the messengers and the versions. While in Hinduism as well, the gods are the same, but the importance differs. Like different sects gives different importance to different god, as someone being the primary and the other being secondary in the whole story. But the concept bit is similar. Like the religion is the same, but there are different versions of it. They still argue within each other who is better, who is correct, and who is wrong. Although it all comes down from the same fiction franchise.
Yeah.
What stages? I was interested in knowing. Once people have identified someone in society that they believe has been reincarnated and remembers past lives, what happens to that person? Is that person basically revered, or are they just like another person? Or, what happens to that person that claims to remember these past lives?
It comes down to their luck. There's no definite, there's no go-to policy of, worshipping or giving someone respect just because they claim to remember their past life. At the same time, there is no go-to policy or written down version that someone must be punished for remembering their past life. It's just what kind of circumstances they land into and what they make out of it, or others around it make out of it. It's just comes down to luck. There's no written rules to that.
Yeah. So there's no benefit in the society for a person who claims that they remember their past lives. There's no benefit for them. There's nothing in it.
There can be, because when the benefit comes down to what the person himself makes out of it. For example, you will find there are gurus who claim to remember their past life, who makes tons of money out of claiming to remember their past lives, whether there is no evidence behind that. At the same time, you will find some poor person who claims to remember their past life and people call him mad because there's no evidence to that. Although they are doing the same thing, just different way and with, a different kind of resources.
I think it's a bit like having visions of the Mother Mary. It depends on who does it and when they do it.
Yeah.
Yes. When you since you used the example of Mother Mary, you will find in at least those, specifically that dark age as we call it, someone might be executed as a witch for having a vision, while someone might be worshipped as someone special for having a vision. It's a similar kind of concept. Just it's not as extreme now, although extreme incidents do still happen, just not as common as it used to be during that age.
Right, right. And how does the caste system feature into the whole reincarnation thing? I mean, what's the likelihood of a Dalit, for example, being reincarnated, someone being reincarnated as a, I'm not exactly sure what I want to ask, but I mean, is there a connection between the caste system and the reincarnation cycles?
Yes, there is, and I'm glad you asked it. I was meaning to talk about it, but I just keep on
Yeah.
forgetting because anyway, yes. When it comes to Hinduism, then the caste system has a major role to it. But when it comes to other religions which has a reincarnation, the major example would be Buddhism. Then the caste system has no role at all. Let me use Buddhism first. In case of Buddhism, it's just about doing good and escaping the reincarnation cycle and
Yeah.
achieving moksha. Moksha is basically, in a way, you can relate it to going to heaven. And while in Hinduism, what happens is you you start as a lower caste,
Right.
you do something good, you do enough good, and then get reincarnated as a higher caste. And it
Okay.
continues till you get reincarnated as the highest caste, and then you do good and go to heaven. So that's the role of the caste system, and you reincarnate. You get born as some caste. You don't do good. You do too much of bad. You go to hell. You do little bit of bad. You get some kind of punishment in hell, and then not for eternity, for some kind of designated period, and then get reincarnated as a lower caste or lower life form to have a second chance. So that's how the caste system plays in, which is also, although dumb and definitely misinformed and opportunistic and oppressive as well. This is an excuse used by people who support the caste system and benefit from it, more like that they must have done something bad in their previous life, which is why they are born as a lower caste in this life, which is why they deserve being oppressed. Just an excuse to exploit other people.
Mhm. Yeah, this and I find the caste system is it's all over any kind of Hindu scriptures that I've encountered. Everywhere. It's just there's caste mentioned in in almost every single Hindu scripture, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, majorly yes. And if you here is something that I can point an origin to, not the caste system itself, but when it comes to the toxicity of the caste system and how exploitative it is, and the rules and regulations, quote unquote rules and regulations regarding it that defines how one should be with respect to others. There's one particular book which is part of the scripture that is called Manusmriti. That's the definitive book when it comes to the exploitative and oppressive caste system and how it functions. And although the caste system is not just present in Hinduism, Hinduism is the one that known the most for it. And I have noticed that is also part of other religions, just not as majorly and as bluntly as it is in Hinduism. For example, Islam itself has several tiers within its Islamic culture. There is I keep forgetting the name, something called Brahmasat, something like that. They also have their version of names where one is lower than the other and stuff like that. I'm sure Christianity will also have something like that. I haven't looked deep into it enough to be able to
Christianity,
give you names, but I'm sure you will find something like that as well. Just not as rigid as and as open as it is in Hinduism.
mate, Western civilization has class, which isn't as close as caste is in India, but very close to it. I mean, we like to not talk about it, but class is a thing in the West. At least in Europe it is. I'm pretty sure in South Africa it is, and in America it certainly is.
Mm.
But
What happens is things like caste system, every society has some kind of major issue that overshadows other issues. So, for example, when it comes to the caste system in West, which I'm, as you have also, agreed with, sure it definitely exists. What happens is it gets overshadowed by the problem of racism. So people don't focus on the caste. People usually talk about racism and the problem that comes with it. While in India, since racism also exists, but the major problem here is casteism, which overshadows other problems like racism, misogyny, and stuff like that.
I
So
mean,
that's what happens.
I must admit, a rather Marxist view on caste is class division made hereditary.
Yeah, that's actually, if you look into this, all the different versions, be it caste, be it sex, everything, it actually comes down to class divisions. They are just different ways of using the class division, different names, different rules, but the core concept is class division, even racism itself.
I mean, the division has and has not worked in every society.
Yes, actually division has worked in every society. Just there has been one form more prominent and more successful than the other, which is what the society gets known for. Although deep down is just a class division.
Yes. And I'm not
Just,
saying that class division is the only thing that matters, and at least in, let's say, Europe, class has become a fluid thing. You can be upwardly mobile. My parents were. And I mean, that doesn't work in caste. That's simply where you were born, as I understand it.
Yes, yes. That actually is the biggest problem with
yeah.
the caste system compared to other class divisions, where you don't get a chance of upward mobility. You just get born into something which you have absolutely no control of.
I, we've been on this show for a bit now. I think, I mean, I love the conversation.
I'm
I'm okay
fascinated by
with
this
going
as
on
well.
with it, but maybe we should, well, be friendly to our producers and try to tie up the show. First of all, Sandra, oh, I love this conversation.
Same here.
Thank you for that. Dean, glad you got on the stream.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. I was a little bit late.
Yeah, no worries. I think I learned a bit from this. Not,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe on another show we should have a look at evidence, as in, is this real or is it just an idea? But I learned a bit. Thank you, Sandris. Thank you.
Yeah.
My
Sandris,
pleasure. Sorry.
have you closing thoughts?
The conclusion would be it, as I've said, it actually all comes down to the concept of class division and different ways of finding out excuses to having you putting yourself as a preferred inherited position compared to other people around you, and exploiting people through that. That's the core concept. Everything else is just ways of doing that. Reincarnation is something that can be used for that. The good part is reincarnation also, compared to the other class divisions, reincarnation also has the concept of explaining some ways of life without putting malice into it. So that's the tiny difference. And I'm just going through the comments, and let me just answer some of them. Uh, Yeah, as Remo mentioned about the old good old racism, and actually racism itself is about even class system and racism is not that different. It's really about discriminating within. You might say that racism is about discriminating between people who doesn't look like you, while caste system is against people that look like you. But even in a society where everyone comes from the single race per se, how you look actually depends on your socioeconomic circumstances. A homeless person, a homeless Caucasian person will look different from another Caucasian person who is not homeless and comes from a position of privilege, although they are both Caucasians. And racism and stuff like that is just easier to notice because the features are different. But it's just about fearing people who don't look like you at your finest. If there are people who overtly look different, then that takes precedence. But when it comes down, when you don't have enough people who look that different, you start targeting people who are not from the same race but looks different from in different ways. It's
Yeah.
just a class system in different ways. That's just how it works.
This is before I forget to ask this. Do you have cases where people lie about the class that they are in? Like, for example, people are from a lower class and they will say, no, they're from this higher class just to get clout in society. Does that happen?
Yeah, that actually is pretty common. Uh, of course, it's not as common as people accepting their place because in society, especially in the eastern side, we have a more of a conformist social norms where people more readily accept what they are given. Like there's a questioning stuff, questioning authority, and questioning people with seniority and other kind of advantages than you is not as common as West, although West itself is not that fluid when it comes to stuff like that, just comparatively a little easier. So it's not as common as people accepting their positions, but people do lie, and there are two sides of the story. This is something where the context of India matters because it might be different in other places. The thing with India is when India got independence, at that era, the caste system was probably at its worst because India already had a problem with casteism. Then British came, and in order to rule India and make it easier and stop rebellions more easily, they exploited the already prevalent caste system in their benefit to turn people against themselves so that they don't turn against the Britishers as a single force. And so they left India at a very terrible place. And so, what the founding fathers of India did was, through the constitution, made a system of reservation. How reservation works is, it gives people of lower caste added benefits so that they can move upwards toward the society and then equalize the caste exploitation. And I'm sure the constitutional reservation system, the person behind it, his name is B.R. Ambedkar. His concept was to gradually phase out the reservation system as the caste exploitation lowers down with the reservation. I'm making complicated. The goal was to have the reservation system, use it to ease out the caste exploitation, and as the caste exploitation gets faded out, the reservation system also keeps getting faded out because that would be the purpose that it has already served. But that didn't happen because politicians, being politicians, took advantage of the reservation system and turned it into vote banks. So now what happens in today's society is there are two types of people who lie. One, who are born in lower caste, don't like being exploited by others, so move somewhere else and pretend to be from higher caste to get that social hierarchy advantage. And then there are people who want that benefits that comes with the reservation. So they might not be from a lower caste, but they go out and with some crook method bring out a caste certificate that certifies them as lower caste. Then they use and exploit the benefits that comes with that certificate. So there are two sides of the story in India.
That's crazy. Eh?
Sandra, I think we must have a conversation about that. What I mean, the complication of class caste and race in a colonial society and the society after colonialism. I mean, the Dutch did very bad things in what's now Indonesia, and I know quite a bit of that. I want to talk about that, but that's for another episode of the Global.
Yeah, definitely. You cannot feed both of them in a single episode.
So thank you for being with this episode. I had a very nice conversation and I learned quite a bit. Thank you for that. Dean, thank you for joining, if a bit late.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
A few excellent questions. And see you on another show of the Global Atheists, I think.
Thank you, Ryan. That was great.